Welcome everyone to the Cardboard Crash Course. My name's Ethan, and today we'll be talking about the Xxcha Kingdom. This is a faction from the Twilight Imperium 4th edition base game, and upgraded by the Prophecy of Kings expansion, all right behind me by Fantasy Flight Games. This will be both a component overview as well as an in-depth analysis later in the video, so stay tuned for that. I really appreciate all of you, and we're just about to pass 2,000 subscribers, so if you want to go ahead and hit that subscribe button to get me there, I really appreciate that as well. So without further ado, let's get right into the video. We begin with the Xxcha Kingdom's faction sheet. The Xxcha were a very benevolent, peaceful race, living on their beautiful planet of Arkan Tau. For millennia, they were respected as the first and strongest of the great races of the galaxy. But after an invasion and occupation of Arkan Tau by the Letnev fleet, and a subsequent war between Letnev and Sol for the control of Arkan Tau, the Xxcha just barely managed to push both fleets off of their planets and escaped to the beautiful new Arkan Ren. Although they live on the beautiful Arkan Ren now, Arkan Tau still looms over them like a terrible scar, reminding them of their past weaknesses. Nowadays, if you visit the Xxcha, each individual may seem peaceful, but you can see their gigantic dreadnoughts and looming flagship over Arkan Ren, just waiting for the next navy to arrive. So that's where they begin on their home systems. This is Arkan Ren and Arkan Tau. As you can see, a 2-3 home planet and a 1-1 home planet. Arkan Tau isn't necessarily too helpful for their strategy. However, they must remain in control of it in order to gain objectives. They also begin with a decent fleet. This is 1 carrier, 2 cruisers, 3 fighters, 4 infantry, a space dock, and a PDS. Although they only have the 1 carrier, they are able to pretty quickly fix that, as we'll discuss in just a moment, and this is not a bad fleet with their defensive playstyle. Alongside this, they start with Graviton Laser System, a 1 yellow prerequisite technology that says you may exhaust this card before 1 or more of your units use Space Cannon. Hits produced by those units must be assigned to non-fighter ships if able. So a little bonus to those PDS there, and their flagship, as we'll see in a second. Moving on to their faction abilities, we have Peace Accords and Quash. Peace Accord says, after you resolve the primary or secondary ability of the Diplomacy strategy card, you may gain control of 1 planet other than Mechatol Rex that does not contain any units and is in a system that is adjacent to a planet you control. So this is basically allowing them to diplomatically take planets instead of aggressively, a really interesting and powerful ability throughout the game. You also have Quash. When an agenda is revealed, you may spend 1 token from your strategy pool to discard that agenda and reveal 1 agenda from the top of the deck. Players vote on this agenda instead. So they have pretty much ultimate control over that agenda phase as long as they're able to pay for it. Moving on, we have the final thing on their sheet, the flagship. This is Lankara Sadu. Please correct me if that's wrong. But it is an 8 cost, 7x2 combat value, 1 movement, and 3 capacity flagship with sustained damage and Space Cannon 5x3. That's the important part there. You also may use this unit's Space Cannon against ships that are in adjacent systems, so not just the one that you are over. This is an incredibly defensive flagship and pretty much allows you for a mobile PDS unit. Another item of theirs that begins with them is the mech. This is a 2 cost and 6 combat value mech called Indomitus. It also has sustained damage and Space Cannon 8, and it can use Space Cannon against ships that are in adjacent systems, just like that flagship can. As you can see, they're not necessarily a PDS race, rather they are a Space Cannon race. Keep that in mind. Their faction technologies are incredibly interesting, and I love playing with them, and the 2 of them are Instinct Training and Nullification Field. Instinct Training is a 1 green prerequisite technology that says you may exhaust this card and spend 1 token from your strategy pool when another player plays an action card. Cancel that action card. So this is the only way to be able to cancel some of them in the deck, and I'll go over that in a moment. Also, we have Nullification Field, a thematically stronger version. It's a 2 yellow prerequisite and says after another player activates a system that contains 1 or more of your ships, you may exhaust this card and spend 1 token from your strategy pool. immediately end that player's turn. That is quite a flashy ability, and when it comes up, you're really going to love having it. I'll discuss why it's important in just a moment. Moving on to their 3 leaders, we start with the Agent. This is Grokutu Rin, the King's Shield. As an action, exhaust this card to ready any planet. If that planet is in a system that is adjacent to a planet you control, you may remove 1 infantry from that planet and return it to its reinforcements. So you can use this as either an aggressive ability against somebody else or a beneficial ability for you. It's really very flexible. Their commander begins locked, and it's Elder Quanage. It unlocks by controlling planets that have a combined total of at least 12 influence. And when it unlocks, it gives you the passive ability. Each planet you exhaust to cast votes provides 1 additional vote. Game effects cannot prevent you from voting on an agenda. So all kinds of abilities can lock you out, and he keeps you in there and stronger. And finally, we have the hero, Zekir Gram. It unlocks by having 3 scored objectives, just like any other hero. However, with this symbol in the bottom, this is from the Codex. This is a print-and-play element as an update to the original hero from Prophecy of Kings, and you'll definitely want this one instead. When it unlocks, you unlock the ability Political Data Nexus. When you exhaust planets, combine the values of their resources and influence. Treat the combined value as if it were both resources and influence. So as you'll notice, this is not a purge ability. That's instead another passive ability just like their commander, and is the first hero to do so. Again, you'll want to print that out from the Codex, and in order to get something with such high quality, check out the links in my description to the Etsy store from which I bought it from. I'm not sponsored. And finally, we have their promissory note, Political Favor. This is what you would give away to somebody else, and they gain the ability. After an agenda is revealed, remove 1 token from the Xxcha player's strategy pool and return it to his reinforcements. Then discard the agenda and reveal 1 agenda from the top of the deck. Players vote on this agenda instead. So basically, this is the quash ability in somebody else's control. Not the absolute best, but you may be able to sell it at some point. And that's all the cards that they begin with. They're really quite a defensive race, but with the Prophecy of Kings expansion, and especially that Codex, they've become quite a force to be reckoned with. So let's discuss how all of these fit together like one big puzzle. So, the Xxcha Kingdom. What do I think of them? Well, they are a defensive race, like it says kind of on the cover. They're turtles, and very peaceful turtles at that. At least they used to be. However, just like in their lore, I think you should take their defensive capabilities and make them more aggressive, all the while protecting what you already have. The back of the faction sheet does say that when provoked, they can be incredibly fast and destructive. So in these videos, I do like to talk about 3 things in a general sense: strategy cards, tech paths, and how to use their abilities together, and which ones may not be as useful. First off, I'm going to start off with the strategy cards. Now, of course, you're going to be pulled towards doing that primary of diplomacy. That's interesting. However, they get just as much value utilizing that peace accords by just doing the secondary of it. And think about it this way. People are going to try to activate your systems already. You have a tool to use against them when it comes to locking down a system, and that's nullification field. Now keep in mind, nullification field is only 1 use per round, unless you have some sort of way of getting around that. But after exhausting that card, you're going to be able to end that person's turn, and unless they have warfare, truly protect yourself. This is what the diplomacy card does already. Now I think diplomacy is important if you're planning on taking Mechatol Rex and locking it out from everybody, or some kind of giant system that you want to protect. But because they get that powerful ability off just the secondary of diplomacy, I really think you should focus on the secondary more than the primary if you really have nothing else to do. They also don't have a ton of use for that primary of leadership. Now, I know what you're going to say. Command counters are always great. And I would agree. If that's your final choice, then absolutely command counters are going to be good. However, they don't really have to use as many command counters as most do, because they don't need the movement in order to take planets. And if they already have taken planets, utilizing that peace accords, they can actually build a forward dock with construction, because construction reads build a PDS or space dock on a planet you control. That includes one that you don't have any infantry on, which moves me into construction, of course. Utilize that primary as much as you can. Not only do they get benefits from Graviton Laser System for their PDS, so you'll be wanting to make as many PDS as possible, you'll also be wanting to make forward docks utilizing that Peace Accord's ability. So getting them out there without having to spend command counters on the forward docks is really quite incredible. And then you can even move into Sling Relay, but we'll talk about that in the text in just a moment. Finally, a couple of cards. Without having to focus so much on the leadership primary, the diplomacy primary, or even the politics primary, because you'll have that control over the agenda phase without being the speaker, you are more able to focus on the 7 and 8, being technology and imperial. Technology will get you to where you really need to be in imperial once you've locked down Mechatol Rex, if that's your strategy. You can even just get some more secret objectives and farm them out on your own little pie slice that you've truly locked down, and ended everybody's turns if they try to enter it. So moving on to the technologies. You do have Graviton Laser System, and I said that Nullification Field is pretty important, and I absolutely stand by that. So your options for this are Sarween Tools, Scanlink Drone Network, and Predictive Intelligence in order to get you to Nullification Field. Sarween Tools is pretty good for them. It's a very consistent discount, however, I don't think that it's necessarily too useful. Again, with Scanlink Drone Network, I really don't think it's as useful even as Sarween Tools. You aren't actually placing any infantry on those planets, so you're unable to re-explore them. And finally, Predictive Intelligence. This is actually the one that I think you should be going with. I've tried to focus less and less about doubling down on faction abilities and more about expanding them and taking what you already have and covering the things that you don't already have a powerful ability for. However, Predictive Intelligence allows you to double down on the agenda phase in an important way. Even though that 3 extra votes isn't going to matter too much, the beginning allows you to redistribute your command counters as you see fit. These are a race, as I've said, that don't need to utilize their command counters for movement. Although they still will with production and everything, they are able to redistribute more of those command counters from the fleet pool and the tactic pool into your strategy pool to eliminate people from being able to attack your pie slice as well as utilize their quash ability more often. So I definitely think that you should go into Predictive Intelligence when on your way to Nullification Field. Now moving on to Instinct Training. Although this is less likely to be as clutch as Nullification Field, I do think that getting it is pretty helpful in the late game. Now, I also don't discuss this card very often because I don't think it's too great, but with them, I think Neural Motivator is your way to go. Neural Motivator allows you to draw 2 action cards during the agenda phase instead of 1. Now I know, that's not very much value. That's not much at all, in fact. However, this does double your chance of getting one of those riders, and riders are going to be your best friend with the Xxcha. You have Quash, the ability to eliminate those agendas where you don't know what the outcome is going to be. So as soon as you get to an agenda utilizing Quash, you are more able to utilize those riders. This gives you massive benefits that I have used in my own games. Now, I know this is a lot of tools that have to come together, but if you're going for Nullification Field anyway, which again is semi-optional, hypermetabolism is a decent way to get there. Now, if you're not going the instinct training route and instead you want to push farther in yellow, this is one of the only factions where integrated economy is truly powerful. When you take control of a planet, you can produce any number of units on that planet that have a combined cost equal or to less than that planet's resource value. You don't need to move there. They're similar to the Sardak Nor, where they're able to take those adjacent systems. However, they don't need infantry for it. If you're taking it diplomatically and then utilizing that integrated economy, it's sort of a thematic way to get people on your side without being aggressive. So with all that out of the way, another reason to maybe not go for instinct training green is to get 1 red instead, and that allows you to do PDS too. Now, again, I said at the beginning this is not a PDS faction, this is a Space Cannon faction. But Space Cannon protecting adjacent systems is incredibly good. And if you're able to build those Space Cannons for free, utilizing that primary of construction, then you really don't need to spend the 8 cost on the flagship and can utilize that for the objectives later on. Their flagship is optional, in my opinion, if you have PDS-2. However, optional does not mean that it's not still good if you absolutely have to protect something. So now that we have strategy cards and tech pads covered, what is their ultimate way of going about things? The Xxcha Kingdom are great when it comes to starting with a small fleet, expanding upon that, and building those forward docks. If you want to go down blue, utilizing Sling Relay and making things out of that, but at least utilizing integrated economy to do so. You now have a giant bubble in which, if you've got nullification field, others cannot touch you. And even if they try to attack your ships, instinct training can deny their direct hits. You are a semi-impenetrable wall, similar to the Argent Flight. However, I do think the Xxcha is a little better at it. You're slowly grinding those high-influence planets, unlocking your commander, and scoring the objectives without having to spend those resources in other ways, meaning that you'll get your hero even earlier. And that hero, so I know you've all been waiting for me to talk about their hero. It's fantastic. It is absolutely phenomenal, especially for getting those stage 2 objectives if you manage to outlast others. Their hero is not as fun as their hero that came in the Prophecy of Kings expansion, which is a little disappointing. I do like the heroes that are one-use ultimate abilities, but I think that if thematically any faction needed a hero that was passive and was a slow growth hero, the Turtles make sense. So ultimately, definitely pick up that Codex, definitely pick up Prophecy of Kings if you haven't already. My name is Ethan. I'm not sponsored at all. This video is not sponsored, so if you want to help me out, you can become a patron of the channel right in the description. I really, really appreciate it. All of my patrons already are going to be up on the screen. I recognize everybody, including those students, MJ Skywalker and Big Al Cappuccino, as well as the Professor Turtle Dude. Thank you very much, Turtle Dude, for being the first professor. All of these proceeds from December are going to the St. Jude's charity, but I will do that again in the future, probably next December as well. So if you want to get on it early, go ahead. If you just want to support me, then I really appreciate it as well. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day now. Pax Magnifica, Bellum Gloriosum.